Hello, and welcome to M&A Success Drivers, How to Align Firm Culture and Integration. My name is Mary Ann Buchanan. I'm founder of RIA Match and moderator of today's webinar. Our guest today is Beverly Flaxington. Bev's a human behaviorist and co-founder of The Collaborative. According to a Harvard Business Review report by Clayton Christensen and his research team, the failure rate of mergers and acquisitions sits between 70 and 90%. Mergers and acquisitions are tough. That's why so many fail. But not because on paper they were not a sound business move, but because little or no attention was paid to the people involved in the M&A. People before numbers is more likely to bring success to any complex change, such as M&A. Thank you for coming. We want you to be part of this critical discussion. You can follow other attendees and share with your own followers on Twitter. Use the hashtag and handles you see on the screen at RIA Match, at Bev Flaxington, and hashtag succession. A little housekeeping here. We would really like to hear from you, and we would like to include your voice in the conversation. So ask questions, share comments, even challenge our ideas. Use the question and answer panel on the right side to share at any time during the webinar. Don't wait till the end, just when you think of it, pop it in. Do you see that handout section? You can download Bev's Culture Match checklist and our RA Match Concierge Lite service description. So let's go ahead and test the question boxes. Also confirms you can actually hear me. So can a few of you, not everybody, but just a few of you, type into your question box the city that you're calling from. And let's see if you guys can, in fact, hear me. It's always a good sound check. There we go. Washington, D.C. Okay, one more. Someone else take a moment. Thank you, Mark, for that. So I know that you guys can hear me. Great. All right. We will have a few poll questions, and those will pop right up on your screen. So more about that later. You're listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane, and that gets you to the dial-in number. And your lines, as I said earlier, are automatically muted. The webinar is being recorded, and it'll be up on the webinar page at RA Match by tomorrow. So be sure and let your colleagues know the session's being recorded, and they can listen at their convenience. So let me tell you a little bit about RIA Match. We provide financial advisors and advisory firms solutions for succession planning and growth. We have three offerings. The RIA Match platform offers low-cost self-service solutions. You search for free and pay to connect anonymously and securely. Our concierge service, our consultants provide personalized advice to crystallize your firm's vision and goals, create an action plan, and then we conduct the search for you to find an enduring match. Our concierge consulting Lite provides the same foundational work as the full service. We help you articulate your vision and your goals. We create the action plan for you, but you then conduct the search. So it's a lower cost service between the full white glove concierge and the self-service RA Match platform, but it gives you the tools you need to begin an effective search. We've talked to a number of advisory firms, and it's that getting started piece is very hard. So this helps you get started. And then we're available for additional consultation if it's needed. You can download that service description in the handouts. Our goal is to bring advisors the most efficient tools and excellent information so that you can make the best decision for the succession and growth of your firm. RA Match has over 3,600 subscribers from 49 states that manage in excess of $250 billion of AUM. So now I'd like to introduce to you our featured speaker, and we can dive into the content. Bev is the human behavior coach, best-selling and gold award-winning author, college professor, speaker, trainer, business consultant, entrepreneur, and behavioral expert. Bev holds 2 patents for a succession program she created for one of the largest mutual fund companies in the world. She's a weekly contributor to Advisor Perspectives, a regular speaker at custodial conferences, and Barron's Top Advisor conferences. Bev's book, Make the Shift, which helps companies and individuals reach higher levels of excellence, is a required textbook for a leadership class at Suffolk University. Bev teaches Entrepreneurship 101 at that university as well. So today, Bev is going to share just a few tips that will help you understand how to identify a culture fit with another firm, and then how to integrate the two firms successfully. So Bev, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights. It's going to be great. What I'd like to do first or next is to share with you the results of the questionnaires you all answered when you registered for the webinar. So the first question is, what type of firms are participating in today's webinar? I think it's always very helpful to know who's in the room with you, right? So 27% of you are market dominators. And we define that as your firm manages 500 million or more of AUM. 24% of you are ensembles with AUM of less than 500 million. 15% are solo practitioners. And interestingly enough, we have a very large percentage of attendees that are service providers, as understanding firm culture and integration are key to the success of their clients. Now, 44% of you, excluding the service providers, have completed a purchase. 11% of you have completed a sale. So over half of you have experienced the issues of firm culture and integration in a merger or an acquisition. So Bev, I think the audience questions should be really good. There's a lot of experience out here.
Yes.
Yes. And so thank you all for being here. So Bev, what I thought I'd do first is launch the first polling question, which defines firm culture, because if we don't, and it's a hard thing to define, and if we can't define what firm culture is, how can we look to match it? So let me go ahead and launch this question. So everybody, you will see that on your screen now. What defines firm culture? Investment management, firm branding, firm priorities, or target client. So if everybody could just pop our screen to the front of your many tabs that are open and take just a minute to vote. It actually is very interesting to see how these things work. Now we've got about 40% have voted, and it's going to be interesting to see the answers here. I'm going to give it a little bit more time. We have about 75% that have voted. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. We've got 4 polls today, so I'm going to work this. You guys know how this all goes. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll. 88% have voted. Thank you so much. Okay, now I can share the results with you. So we have a clear winner there. 87% say firm priorities. So Bev, what are your thoughts on this one?
Very happy to see these results. So yes, so I think, and we talk a lot about culture by design, and I think that there's a few different elements of firm culture, and certainly priorities and why we exist, how we manifest it are absolutely top of the list. But, I also think that we tend to sometimes overlook the fact that the leader of the firm or leaders of the firm or the decisions that get made, there's going to be communication styles, there's going to be behavioral styles, they're going to have certain values. So you'll find in a firm, no matter how small or how large, that certain things get rewarded while other things do not. And so people start to learn what is it that is, the positive aspects of what we're doing, and what is it that are areas that we're not going to get rewarded for. So I think that also feeds into it. But yes, a firm that can sit down, set their goals, define their vision, decide what matters most to them, figure out how the leaders are communicating, what their values are, and can crystallize that, is going to have a much easier time describing their culture, being able to communicate it, being able to live it, than somebody who just does worry about, say, the story. You had the option of branding, Marianne, or,
Yep.
how, what types of people we hire.
Yep.
So really want to be sure that you're being
client. Yeah, sometimes people think the target client, that defines who we are. And I understand how people would think that, because that is, that can mold who you are. If you're attracting the ultra high net worth, that, it could, but it's not. I think one of the tough things is that maybe firms don't actually, well, I'm not going to give it away. There's another question, but it's about documentation. So, as I said, we're going to start this off quickly. So what we're going to do next are ask 2 polling questions, sort of close together, and then I won't cut Bev off again. I promise, Bev. So let's look at this one. This is a simple yes, no. And as I said, I really appreciate everybody taking a minute to just answer the question. Is firm culture currently a section in your business plan or a goal in your strategic plan? So, wow, this is, yep, I'm impressed with these numbers because I can see them rolling in, which is very exciting. So we've had just about half the room is voted. People wouldn't mind just popping to the front of your screen and voting. It takes a really quick second to do it. And we'll give it a few more seconds. I love this feature of GoToWebinar. I'll do a little GoToWebinar commercial. It's great. Okay, so we've got over half have voted. So I'm going to close this poll and share the results with you. So not surprising there, but this actually, the thing is surprising, is actually currently documented. So Bev, hold that thought for me just one sec, because I'm going to actually do the next poll really fast so that you can talk without giving away answers. Okay, and one more poll on firm culture. Who is the most important driver of culture in your firm? The founder, the partners, the employees, the clients. So this is a little trickier. Some of these are give me questions, right? But this one is actually a little trickier, and you can see the answers are showing that. So I'm going to leave it out there for just a couple more seconds and close it, and then Bev, I will turn it back to you. Okay, I think we've got over half the room is, almost 75% is voted. Great, thank you so much. I appreciate that. This is actually a good one. Let me go ahead and share those responses. Okay, so we have who's the most important driver of culture? 45% said founders, 36% said employees, and then an even split partners and clients. So now, Bev, go back to it. I sort of interrupted you, but I wanted people to think through this with you. So talk a little bit more about culture by design, and if you could actually give me or give us examples of firms that have very identifiable culture. Sometimes a story helps put some sort of shape to the concept.
So first of all, let me say I'm impressed by a group of attendees, because we rarely see that people have, in fact, carved out firm culture as a deliberate aspect of their business plan, kind of talking about how we want certain things to play out, what do we want to be known for. So a lot of people will set the vision, they'll set the goals, but in terms of really saying what does it mean to our culture, that is pretty unusual. So kudos to the many people on the webinar that are doing that. I think that sometimes, though, when people think about culture, they will often think maybe about, say, the way we treat our clients or the way we treat our employees. And I think a lot of times there are interesting nuances that can sometimes get missed. And so you're asking about a story, and I think about a client firm that we worked with recently, that we worked with them after they had made an acquisition, and they were actually being very deliberate around cultural integration and how to bring the two groups together, how to make people feel a part of the joint organization. But there were these interesting nuances because one firm was very committed to having process, having repeatable ways of doing things. They had spent years and years and years really making sure that they had a system and that everybody knew the system. And the other firm was much more about, we're very smart folks. They would only hire people who were very credentialed. They had a lot of CFAs. We call it sometimes from a values perspective, we call it a high theoretical view. So the theoretical, the research, the learning. And so you think about those two, they're not on the face of it necessarily in conflict, but there was some conflict that was created because the process people could look and say, we don't need to research this. We have a system, we have an approach, but these credentialed people were looking and saying, but we've got to make sure we're on the cutting edge. We've investigated everything before we make a decision. And I bring that one up because this was a group that was very thoughtful about making sure they did put a focus on integration, bring people together, help people define roles. And yet you had kind of this backdrop going on the whole time where in order then to make some decisions, you saw where there were some cracks here and there because those are really two different philosophical business views.
And how did they blend the two? Or is that a work in progress?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. And so this is something I think a lot of our participants do want to think about, another nuance, if you will, that I think gets missed. Most of the time in these mergers, acquisitions, succession, where you may, bring in a book of business, most of the time someone's in the stronger position. They've got a little bit more power. And even where you might look at it and say it's a merger, there usually is going to be somebody who is the top dog. Yeah, the top dog. And so I think one of the things that the lesser dog, in this case, kind of firm, and I'm a dog lover, so those are not negative connotations. But the one that was not in that top position, I think that they were a little bit surprised by the fact that their voice wasn't quite as going to be as loudly heard. So this is another thing too, when you have, Marianne, I think two issues. I mean, one is being deliberate about whomever it is that you're going to partner with, that you're going to merge, acquire, be acquired by, et cetera, looking at that cultural piece. But the other part is making sure that you're really clear when you're going into it, when decisions have to be made. Are you going to have a voice? And to what level are you going to have a voice? And how much are you going to have an impact? Because I've seen more than 10, probably closer to 15 situations where the lesser firm, let's call it, and I mean, I don't mean it in a negative sense that their firm is lesser, but lesser power in the final merger, have been just surprised at how their voices are minimized. So that's an important thing, I think, to think about and be sure you're clear with during negotiations.
And I think sometimes at the beginning of relationships, everybody looks for sort of confirmation bias. They want it to work. They look at what does align and focus on that. And that's where I think some of the concrete aspects of which are critically important to a deal, the valuations, the deal structure, the deal terms, these are all very critical components, very necessary, but not sufficient. And so I think sometimes when we're with the clients I've worked with, they tend to focus on what works, which is fabulous. I mean, you need to say this is a positive of it, but you need to have that space to go into where do we not align and how are we going to get there. And I think the voice one is, that's a very, very good point. How would
I'm so sorry, Marianne. No,
I'm
I was
sorry,
just
Beth.
going to say it's why, though I did use that when you asked about an example, they came to mind because here is a group who was, very thoughtful and took a lot of the right steps, actually put an
Right.
emphasis on it, and yet, you have these underlying things. So I want
And
to think about all of it.
how do they assess whether they're going to have voice or impact?
So I think that, one of the dynamics that I think happens a lot, and it's very natural, right, when you think about human behavior, when you are going through this process, you're going to very naturally be focused on the financials. You're going to be focused on, if let's say you've grown a firm and you care a lot about your employees, you want to make sure they're taken care of, you want to make sure certain roles are defined, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot of emphasis that's naturally put on the deal. How are we going to structure the deal? What's the payout going to look like? If the acquired firm, if the founders decide they want to leave, what's that going to look like? So a lot gets focused there, and I think that people do neglect to think about once this, the ink is dry and we start to put things together, we're going to have to make a lot of business decisions together. Or again, one group is going to have the power to make decisions. The other group might be, their voices are smaller in the process. And I think it doesn't, in my experience, get talked about very much. It's almost like the equivalent, I think about in the hiring process, right? So firms put a lot of emphasis on making sure you've got the right job description and what should the salary be and, what kind of background do you need someone to have, but then they don't think about onboarding and how are we going to measure success and how are you going to give this person feedback. And I'd liken it to that, but obviously on a much grander scale. So I think those, discussions about how are we actually going to run the business, how are we going to communicate if we reach an impasse, how are we going to make decisions? And my guess is I can almost hear people maybe on this webinar, or certainly I've had people say it to me where they say, well, I don't want to start to bring these things up, right? I don't want to rock the boat and potentially damage the ability to do the deal. But unfortunately, if you don't, you may find yourself in a situation that is nothing like what you had expected that it was going to be. And I've seen that happen way too many times. Right.
One other thought on this is sort of on the M&A side of it is I think that there's a misperception of inorganic growth. It's often thought, I think there's a belief that buying AUM is easier than adding new clients organically. And I find that it's not, it's important for people, for firms and advisors to understand the complexities of this aspect of the deal. And when your clients that you're working with, Bev, who are addressing this side of it, do they see that they've gotten sort of blinded by the AUM in front of them?
Yes, so I would say a couple of things. So it absolutely is more appealing. I was just with a client this morning, and they have just purchased not the entire practice, but the clients, and it's $30 million in one fell swoop, and that can look a lot better for a week's work than looking for a couple of client referrals and maybe bringing in, 2 new clients at, $3 and $5 million each or something. At the same time, Mary Ann, I do think that what gets missed, to your point, is it isn't as easy, though, as just slipping those clients in and assuming that they're going to know who you are, why you do what you do, how you do it. So having some sort of communication plan in place. Another thing that I see a lot, and I have yet another firm, they've gone through a merger. They, for the most part, are of like minds in terms of the way they make decisions, the way they want to run the firm, but their philosophy about client management is very different. One is very much of the belief of segmentation and, just being really careful about who should get what. And the other really is, we make our clients happy at all costs, and they are able to respond to something on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m. And so you think about that from and so we can all look at that, right? And we would just say objectively, well, of course that should have got talked about, et cetera. But the complexity is that both of those firms have taught clients how to expect certain things. And so now are we going to teach them something new? Are we going to just keep managing them the way they've become used to? Are we going to step back and say, maybe neither of our ways is the best and maybe we should come up with a new way? But there's a lot involved with bringing clients along.
And that communication plan, you've said that a couple of different times. It's a communication plan for the clients, it's a communication plan for the staff and the new owners.
Yes.
That's for everybody. Now, Bev, in the download section of our today's webinar, we've got your culture match checklist. Is there anything that you want to say? Whoever wants to download that, that's there now. You can do that. Is there anything you want to say about the checklist to help, orient people toward it? It's pretty straightforward.
And we, as you know, Marianne, why we get along well together, because we like to do things that are action-oriented and straightforward. And so I think that it is, fairly self-explanatory, but what I would recommend, though, is that, those of you who are listening to this and thinking about going through a process like this, you definitely do want to put yourself, though, through the paces to go through the checklist and make sure that you are, in fact, doing the things that you think that you're doing. And so what I mean by that is, we've just had so many situations over the years where we may ask somebody, so do you have, I don't know, just pick something, right? Do you have a good sales plan in place, written plan? Yes. And then when we go through a checklist, though, of what do we mean by that, it's rare that you're going to find that somebody really has done it in the thorough kind of manner that, we're talking about. So I think when somebody, when you ask somebody, one of the points on the checklist, right, our leaders lead on culture. Okay, so you can say yes, but then I think you have to push yourselves a little bit to say, what does that really mean?
Yeah,
so
how?
What, right?
You have to sort of document how are you leading with culture.
Yes. Or hiring people and confirming it. We'll have firms all the time tell us that that's a very important step in their hiring process. But, how? Because, again, let's take, for example, my firm that, says we just, we treat the clients well at all costs, right? We're available to them, at all times. And so I could ask someone in the interview process, I could say, so how client-centric are you? We're a really client-centric firm. We believe in giving our clients the best attention possible. And the person might, they're passionate, they're excited, they want the job, they say yes. But they didn't mean that they were willing to take a call on a Sunday and return the call. They didn't mean that 3 days a week they're willing to, work past 7 o'clock if that's what your firm does. So I think getting very granular, this is where I find a lot of this falls apart. It's the difference between, yes, we know it, and then, okay, but specifically, what are you doing?
Right. Now, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. So we're going to do one last polling question, and this will take us to the discussion of integration. So here we go. Where in the vetting process should the two firms address integration? At hello, after business and financial compatibility is established, once deal terms are set, or after the deal has closed? Okay, we've got some solid answers here. I'm going to leave it open for a little bit more. We have over a quarter of you, over a third of you have voted. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being, it's interesting to hear what your thoughts are, and it makes a difference in our discussion, so your participation really does matter. So I'm going to leave it open for just a little bit longer. We have 70% that have voted so far. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll, and let me share the results. Okay, so here we are. At hello is 31%. After business and financial compatibility is established is 62. 8% once deal terms are set, and then no one said after the deal closed. So that was good. So Bev, what are your thoughts on this? Talk to us about integration. And you have been. I realize what you're saying is also part of the integration part, but Carrie, take us through it.
Well, and again, I think what's really important here, Marianne, is that we're defining what some of these terms mean. So, I would not necessarily say that if I'm, starting to get to know someone a little bit and I, think that potentially we're a fit, but we're still feeling each other out, that I necessarily would want to start to get into, well, this is how, we manage clients, and this is the people sitting in these seats, and this is why we would only want to have one CEO, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that it's probably somewhere after hello, but maybe, before you've gone through and really done so much due diligence. But I think that, in my experience, and maybe it's just because, we're asked to come in a lot of times once the deal is done, the true answer to that is that we see it typically happening once the deal is signed, and in fact after the two firms have somehow come together. Because when I think about integration, I'm thinking a lot about the specifics of what we do in the day-to-day, who's going to sit in what seats, how it is we're going to make decisions, what our communication process is like, how it is that we're going to serve the clients, what's the client experience going to be like, how much are we going to run in parallel, right, with two different firms maybe doing things differently, how much are we going to force collaboration and one way. And we just find that in most cases, few of those practical, tactical, culture type questions really are answered until the contract process is done, and now we're, linked up, and we've got to figure out how to make it work.
I'm living this with current clients. Absolutely. Yep. And that's it's also important because in an earlier stage, if you can find that you're misaligned, even though the numbers work and everyone's all about, what the cash and equity mix is and what the earnout is, and, they're all about the terms. If there's an incompatibility, a bad deal costs you way, way more in time and emotion and then maybe, hopefully not, but money, right, than a good deal. So, you get this great bump from a good deal, but a bad deal can set you back twice as far below,
And Marianne, I was going to say, and we may be fortunate to just be joined today by people who have done this the right way and really have a lot of good stories to tell. But I think that, from where you and I both sit and what we do, I feel very blessed to do this work. We get to, see the inside of a number of firms. People share, not just the business elements, but they'll share, emotional responses, frustrations, what makes them happy about what they've done. And I just, I don't see a lot of situations where these issues really do get pushed until they're at the point where, the deal is effectively done. And I do respect why. As I said, I think it's not wanting necessarily to rock the boat, not wanting to offend one another, but I just would underscore what you just said, which is you're not but you're not going to avoid it. You're just going to delay the pain,
right.
and then
Right.
and then have to have a more difficult time of trying to fix it and make it work more effectively. So I think it's so accurate.
And sometimes I was actually in a meeting recently where I said, okay, let's go to an uncomfortable place and let's talk about some of the things that the alignment may not know. There might be a misalignment, or there's something that needs to be communicated. And just going back to that communication plan, let's communicate clearly everybody's role. Sometimes the roles not being defined that's the sort of like one that can be a good first step. But I want to say one other thing, Bev. You're right in that when I talk to advisors in advisory firms, their ability to be honest is very impressive. They're like, this is where it is, this is where, one-on-one, they can, and that's really an honor when they take us into their confidence and really talk about their challenges. It's very good. And there are so many successful firms out there, but there are advisors who are very successful that want to pull back on the amount of work. They want to not have the day-to-day, but they also don't want to give up everything. And so, is there that middle ground?
Well, and I think, and I would completely concur. I mean, to be honest with you, I love this work. I love this industry. I, really do enjoy the people that we work with a lot. And so, none of what, I think, for us, it's more looking at, for people like you and I, it's more looking at how do you maybe prevent somebody from going through some of the pain that we've seen other people go through. Or I just find that many times post, say, a merger or an acquisition or buying, a book of business, the firm is just spending a lot more time on, that integration piece, that trying to match culture, or trying to get somebody to, come around and see the light or communicate with clients. And I think that there, a lot of times it just isn't anticipated quite how much this is going to, suck up time and energy. And so that's why I come back to, looking even at something as simple as the checklist. It's just a way to keep you on track, but it also hopefully will maybe force some of these discussions, internally, and then when you're talking to a potential partner, so that it is something that you're addressing sooner rather than later. It's not like there's right or wrong answers on it, right? It's just more having the discussion is, I think, the underlying of what we're trying to recommend.
Bev, look at this chart that you and I talked about. Is there, I just put up here stakeholders, who the stakeholders are, the why, and the benefit. I just wanted to give a visual to the webinar attendees. Is there anything that they can do within that that's helpful?
Well, I mean, I think that to me, this takes this whole idea of culture. What do we stand for? So there's a couple of different ways that I might think about applying this. I mean, one is to even think about the why around why are you doing this, right? And what is the benefit? Right. And so let's say you've identified a firm. I'd ask the why question, why is this firm attractive to you? And see how many of the answers are not related to the financial aspect, but are more related to other, cultural, softer things. You want to then, depending on the type of firm that you have, you could engage your staff in that same conversation, or you could just fill this in on their behalf, but to say, why would our staff want to be a part of this firm? What would be the benefit to them? And then certainly clients, why would our clients want to be part of this firm? And then talk in terms of, benefits or outcomes. So you could use it both from the perspective of, why is it that we're choosing this route? You mentioned earlier, Marianne, acquiring as opposed to acquiring so that it's inorganic growth versus organic growth. We often push our clients even to answer the why on that question. Is it sometimes people think that the process of growing organic growth is so difficult. This is the easier thing, but again, I'd want to kind of push myself, because if you're thinking that it's easier, then you really do want to take a step back, and because it's not necessarily easier, it's just different, which,
That's right.
could be fine, could be better, but push yourself to really think about, why you're doing it and why this is the right answer for you.
Exactly. Well, that's wonderful. What I want to do now is open it up for questions. So if you have any questions for Bev, type them in your question box. And we're at the 40-minute mark. Bev, perfect timing there. And so we wanted to spend about 5 minutes answering questions. So if there's anything that you want to ask, feel free. So one question, though, Bev, is, we talked about the ideal integration. But let's say a firm is now, they've purchased, they've made the acquisition, they're looking at this, they haven't done it well, so and both sides are struggling. What is that struggling? What if that struggling firm? What can they do now?
Yes, and so that is absolutely more, the situations that we see. So, and you as well, Marianne, will get, called in when that's the case. So, a couple of things. First of all, it is the time to take the step back. Some of this is going to depend on size of the firm, how you do it. So it may just be the partners, it may be the entire firm, it may be leadership in the newly merged firm, and be able to together develop what that vision is. So, we talk about the importance of vision and mission and knowing where we're going. So you really do have to then take that step back as a full leadership team or full firm and agree on who it is we want to be. And then you have to look at the processes, the ways you're doing things, kind of match them to that vision. So we always talk about it as kind of the litmus test on a day-to-day basis. So the way you're doing things, the decisions you're making, are they congruent with what you've set out as your vision? But it really is critically important, if you've not done some of this up front, to start with who do we want to be, where are we going, make sure we're all headed in the right direction, because that conversation alone can be a very, lengthy conversation. There can be a lot to work through. But then once you define that, some of then the decisions in terms of the day-to-day and how we're going to do things get a little bit easier, because at least you've got that, that beacon, that lighthouse, that thing that you're aiming for, that everybody has agreed is most important.
Actually, it can be healing. I have found it that if everyone gets quiet and genuinely wants a good outcome and is willing for some give and take, they can, sort of people who sure, the money is there, but if they're offended or if they're not making, not having the impact that they want to have in the new firm, if they come to these, often it's an off-site meeting, and have these discussions, it can write an unsteady start to a merger or an acquisition. And so the acquiring firm knows that if they don't, it's the relationships, it's a people business. So they need these people of the firm that they acquired in order to keep their new clients happy.
Exactly. And there just is no replace, somehow you've got to make sure everyone is on the same page at the, for the big things, right? The vision and who we want to be. And unfortunately, a lot of times the conversations can more be focused on, well, which of these systems is best, and,
which technology.
Yes. But it's
concrete.
Very hard to answer it if you don't all believe you're, kind of rowing in the same direction. That's got to get defined first.
And it's an amazing, I understand it, but when someone's like, well, our firm, we always had open door policy and you could walk in and out of people's offices whenever you wanted. The firm that they were acquired by closed doors, and, people were making appointments with you that should, like, your Outlook appointments. And they were like, unbelievable. We had no idea. And it's that kind of thing that those small things matter.
They matter a lot, because that is culture. That's culture.
Right.
That's how do we live it out every day. It's an excellent example.
Yeah, no, And the firms that have been participating on the that are here at the webinar that have already done this, what we're talking about, and hopefully the information that Bev has brought to light is confirming and maybe enlightening as well. And those that are getting ready to enter into the M&A space or actively looking to sell or to buy, these are very good, solid foundational building blocks within which to begin. So Bev, this has been great. We wanted to keep it at the 45-minute mark, and we're right on that. So that's awesome. But thank you very much. Your knowledge and work in our industry is just invaluable. And thank you to our audience for taking the time to join us today for Drivers of M&A Success, How to Align Firm Culture and Integration. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at marianne.buchanan@riamatch.com, and we can answer any other questions that you have. We are grateful that you are part of the RIA Match community. Good afternoon, and this concludes our webinar today. Thank you.